Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to everybody who's here. Some of you are here for coffee, and some are also here for the presentation on Ann Arbor's carbon neutrality plan. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming up. Ann Arbor 3 years ago adopted a plan called A20 to get to net zero for carbon by 2030, which is a very, very ambitious plan. And today we have Joe Lang, who is an energy coordinator in the Office of Sustainability and Innovation at the city. That's the group that's chartered with leading the way to get Ann Arbor net zero by 2030. Joe's work is primarily on 2 of the 6 strategies that are in the A20 plan. One is electrification of our appliances, transitioning appliances from gas, fossil fuel driven to electric powered. And the other strategy is increasing the efficiency of our buildings. Prior to joining at the Office of Sustainability and Innovation, he worked with scientists and local governments and wildlife managers across India to prepare for climate change. Joe has a master's in environmental science and a master's in public administration from Indiana University and a BA in environmental policy at Michigan State.
All right, thanks everyone for having me today. Like Clark mentioned, I work for the Office of Sustainability and Innovations here at the City of Ann Arbor. And I'm here just to give you a quick kind of overview of our A20 carbon neutrality plan for the City of Ann Arbor. Just a couple glimpses of what it is, how we developed the plan, what we're currently doing with the plan, and some things for what this could mean for you, try to find areas where you might be interested in learning more about, just to give an overall sense of what we have going on here in Ann Arbor. I have a little slideshow here today just for me to organize my thoughts. Don't want to bore anyone with another slideshow, but just that's what I'm looking at down here. So what I first wanted to start off with is just kind of grounding the conversation in the past of Ann Arbor. Work on energy, environment, climate, things like that are not new to this community. Going all the way back to 1981 is when the City of Ann Arbor first founded an energy advisory board and adapted an energy plan, kind of governing what we're doing towards energy in the city, and starting to look at how we can kind of work towards being at that point more efficient, cleaner energy, even at that time back in 1981. A lot of things have happened within that time. I'm not going to bore you with all the little steps in between, but just know that Ann Arbor does have a long history of working on energy and environmental issues, trying to make this a safer, cleaner, healthier place to live. And that brings us to 2019. In 2019, this was around the time of when a bunch of stuff was going around in the scientific community, think Paris Accords, things like that. When a climate emergency was declared, both at a very broad level, but here specifically in Ann Arbor, our city council declared a climate emergency for Ann Arbor. At that same time, they tasked the city with developing a plan for getting to community-wide carbon neutrality by the year 2030. And so that's what people in the city started doing. So led by the Office of Sustainability and Innovations, we spent a lot of time in a very short period of time, so think from November to March of 2019 to 2020, so just over 4 months, met with so many different folks. We had about 68 public events during that time period to hear from people. We had 2 large town halls gathering additional residents, getting their feedback. We worked with 80 different technical advisors to kind of help shape what was in the plan. And then we also recruited about 66 different collaborating organizations within our area that are working on similar things. This number has since grown to about 110 organizations. So getting just a whole bunch of different thoughts, a whole bunch of different feedback, a whole bunch of just figuring out what people want, what people care about, figuring what is going to work for them as we all work to develop this plan. And so this ended up in a plan that is a world-class plan. It's renowned by all over the place. People reference it all the time. But it has a lot of stuff in there that's it is developed by Ann Arbor and for Ann Arbor. It's not just something that was copy and pasted of what, say, they're doing out in Colorado or California or something like that, but instead really developed to our local context for what's important to residents in Ann Arbor. And so it's important to note that, again, at this point in time, we were going towards carbon neutrality. Emissions were slowly decreasing over time. So, when you were around 2019, there was like a steady decrease in emissions over that time, but not nearly at the rate that we need for what scientists say we need to do to help protect our planet. And so once, again, after that about 4-month period, so in March of 2020, the plan was brought back to council. And then council requested a couple additional documents for how the plan would be going forward. So this included a prioritization framework, so looking at the different strategies that were developed as part of the plan and kind of ranking them by, what are some of the most impactful things we could do. An investment scenario, so looking at how much some of these different things would cost, how much, if you put in, say $10 here, how much of a benefit would you have overall, as well as a governance framework, which was very important for us because this allows the plan to adapt over time. We know that, technology and science are not stagnant. Think about just iPhones and how every year there's a whole new iPhone that, well, maybe new, who knows. But there's something new every year kind of coming out, and so we want to make sure our plan isn't stagnant. As things change, how are we going to update the plan? As we work on different strategies, different programs, what if something doesn't work out well? How do we pivot to make it into something that is working better? And if something is working well, how do we continue to make it work well? So all of those plans were brought back to City Council in June of 2020, at which time it was unanimously adopted by City Council. So the plan was in place, had everything there for getting us to carbon neutrality by the year 2030. It is aggressive, it is audacious, but it is something that is absolutely necessary if we want to stave off the worst effects of climate change that we are already facing both here in Ann Arbor and across the world. Before I get into some of the different things we're working on, I want to just highlight some of the guiding values and vision for the plan itself. These were all developed by, again, through all of those different listening sessions, and were things that were consistently highlighted by residents, businesses, members of the community, of things that were deeply, deeply important for them as it related to what was happening in the plan. So the first one is equity and having an equitable plan. We know that many people, some of our most vulnerable populations, are those who are experiencing the worst impacts of climate change, yet they are some of the folks who have done the least to contribute to it. So we wanted to make sure that whatever was in the plan was really addressing that, making sure that everybody, regardless of their situation in life, was able to get access to the resources they need as we go on this transition. And additionally, just sustainability. Probably goes without saying, but something for a sustainability plan wants to have sustainability. But that means more than just being sustainable in the sense of, having the resources in place for current and future generations, but also, again, making sure that the plan itself is sustainable, something, again, that can be updated as we go to make sure it's working for everyone. And then lastly, transformation. Simply put, we would not be in the current situation we're in if the current systems in place were working. So we needed to make sure that anything we did was innovative and was able to really transform our situation. And this all brings it back to the guiding vision of A20, which is together creating and implementing a just transition to carbon neutrality by 2030. This isn't just something done by the Office of Sustainability, it isn't just something done by me, the mayor, city council. Instead, it's something we're all collaboratively working towards together because simply no one can do this by themselves. And so how do we do this? So the plan itself is organized into 7 different strategies. So the first strategy is powering our electrical grid with 100% renewable energy. Strategy 2 is switching our appliances and vehicles off of fossil fuels to electricity. Strategy 3 is improving the energy efficiency of our buildings. Strategy 4 is reducing the miles we travel in our vehicles. Strategy 5 is changing the way we use, reuse, and dispose of materials. Strategy 6 is enhancing the resilience of our people and our place. And then we have a category of other strategies because they don't necessarily fit nicely within just one strategy. Instead, they kind of intersect throughout all of them, but are still a big enough priority that they're in their own category there. And then to break this down further, I'm not going to list all of these, but inside of those 7 different strategies, there's 44 different actions. So these address like all ranges of that spectrum from those different strategies. And again, I'm not going to list them all just because there's a bunch of them, but just know that they're very, very wide-ranging because the problem is an entire system of where we are. And you can't just kind of pull one lever and instantly fix the problem. Instead, you got to look at things in one area, how it relates with something in another area, and then in another area, so on and so forth. So they're just really, really wide-ranging strategies, and I'm going to talk about just a few of them here as we go forward. So just to give a better sense, because listing off a bunch of strategies, a bunch of actions, what does that mean? So I'm just going to go through and list a couple of the different actions that we're working on in relation to those strategies to help give you a better sense of what is happening as part of this plan, and also kind of seeing how it fits in with your everyday life, things you might be interested in, things you might be interested in getting involved with, just to kind of better ground what this is instead of me just spouting out a list. So starting with strategy 1, which again is powering our electrical grid with 100% renewable energy, we're approaching it in a couple different ways. So as we look at our residential sector at the moment, we have our Solarize program. If you're not familiar with this program, basically what it is you get a whole bunch of people together, say we're all here living in a neighborhood, say maybe Clark takes the lead and gets you all together because you're all interested in buying solar. You then go and you meet with a contractor who you select, and then because you're all going in at the same time buying solar in that capacity, you get a bulk discount. Because it's not just you doing one job for the contractor, instead it's like 20, 30, 40 people all buying at once, so they can give you that discount and saves you money upfront on the installation. So far through this program, it started around 2019, 2020, we've saved residents $1.5 million just in the upfront cost of buying solar. As we brought almost 4 megawatts of new solar on people's homes during this time. Over the lifespan, those systems are projected to save people about $15 million combined in their energy costs. Additionally, we're currently, actually right now, we're having solar installed on a couple different city facilities. This will bring us up to about 4 megawatts of solar on those city facilities, with the goal of having more as we go. And then lastly, one of the things we're currently investigating right now is something called a sustainable energy utility. Basically what this is, it's a joint utility, and what it does is give more people access to renewable energy that might not be able to traditionally. Under the traditional model, if you don't own your own roof, your own land, it's hard to, you can't necessarily put solar. Like I'm a renter, I can't put solar on my roof because I don't own my roof. So basically what this would be, it would be a utility that kind of helps connect people to have access to this in a different way, so that everyone has access to clean, safe, healthy, and affordable energy. For strategy 2, which is converting our appliances in vehicles from fossil fuels to electric, we have a couple different ways we're approaching this as well. One of the things we have is we have an electrical vehicle readiness ordinance. So to kind of getting everything in place for when electrical vehicles are usable for more people, and again, especially addressing people that don't have access to, say, at your home, you can install an electrical vehicle charger, but again, what if you don't own your home? So having different ways in place to have more public electric vehicle chargers for people who might need that, like multi-unit dwellings, people on campus, different things like that. We're also doing a couple different things to incentivize heat pumps, which is a technology that both heats and cools your home at a much more efficient level than a lot of the traditional appliances. So we have a couple different things. We're approaching it both from the consumer side, so having different educational events, different options to kind of help with the prices of them to kind of bring that down, but also working directly with contractors in the area, because again, the technology, while it's been around for a while, it's still something that's kind of new to a lot of people. So making sure that people are familiar with it, contractors know how to install it well, so that we can get it kind of in place for everyone, so it's something that is possible for people as they're looking to improve their different appliances. And then we also, for plan reviews, every plan review that gets submitted to the city now has to go through a sustainability portion of that review. So it kind of gets looked at for the different ways that it aligns with the A20 plan. And then those reviews are all part of that, saying like, here's where you're doing a good job, here's where you could improve on. That has to go during that plan review process. Then for strategy 3, which again is increasing the efficiency of our buildings, we're approaching this in a couple different ways because all buildings are not the same, especially as you go across everything. So looking directly at, say, the rental sector, this is something that's currently, we're looking into it. It's not established yet, but we're currently working through the process. It's called the Green Rental Housing Program. And what this is it's something that will set a minimum level of efficiency for rentals to kind of get them all up to the same standard. And then for homes, single-family homes, Again, this isn't in place yet, but we're working through it. It's called the Home Energy Rating Disclosure, which all it would be is when the home goes up for sale, it has to get an energy assessment to just roughly say, here's how energy efficient the home is. Think of it kind of like when you're buying a car, it's got that miles per charge or miles per gallon rating on it. Same kind of concept. It would just say roughly, your house is this level of efficiency. You do not have to do anything at that point, but it just helps the buyer get a better sense of, okay, here's what the house is gonna be. I'll roughly spend this much in terms of energy bills per year. And then if you so choose, you could do more at that point, and it gives you a guiding thing instead of just being like, well, I've heard this is something good, maybe this will be good. It's actually, no, this is what's good for your house. So if you want to do that, you can, but you do not have to. And then lastly, for our large buildings, this is currently in place. We have a commercial benchmarking program, which again, all it is for property and building owners. They just put in their rough levels of energy consumption, and then they can kind of see where their building is, how it's doing energy-wise, and they can kind of start to make more informed decisions on different things that are gonna save them energy, save them water, which saves them money in the long run. And then for strategy 4, which again is reducing the miles we travel in our vehicles, we're expanding EV charging infrastructure. If you go around the different Downtown Development Authority garages here, we've installed roughly 80 public chargers in them, as well as City Hall just a few blocks away. There's 4 fast charging chargers there that are available to anyone. And we're also actively expanding our bike lanes and sidewalk networks and increasing the safety of them. So as you see, again, the ones around downtown, they got those nice barriers so you can feel safer when you're biking on them. And as well as we're expanding out different crosswalks, installing the lighting around them so people feel safer using those instead of just having to rely on driving everywhere. And then for strategy 5, which again is changing the way we use, reuse, and dispose our materials, we're working on just a very broad term that's called the circular economy, which is basically just looking at how everything flows throughout the economy so we have better ways of using materials that's more effective in the long run. So instead of every time, say, oh, I need a new shirt, I go out, buy a new shirt from, I don't know, say somewhere, it gets shipped from somewhere, all that kind of stuff. How can I find something that maybe someone has lightly used that is still just fine and works for me? Similarly, say, I got a table and I'm tired of my table, I want a new table, but it's perfectly fine. How can I get that back to someone else who could use it? Because again, it works perfectly fine. So just kind of figure out how we can get things flowing through instead of having to make everything new and then throwing away when we're done with it. So on our city website, we have a map of all of the businesses and other locations that are participating in the circular economy. And again, a lot of these are things that you're probably already familiar with. Think thrift stores, think the library, think all these sort of places where, again, instead of just getting something new and throwing it out when you're done, it's kind of circling through the economy. Additionally, we have a pilot program right now with a couple local restaurants here working on returnable containers. So, think, when you go and you get takeout, you get that little plastic container, which maybe you can save for a bit and use a couple times for leftovers, but inevitably has to get thrown out. These are containers that you get your food's in there, you bring it back. You eat your food, it's delicious. Afterwards, you can rinse it out, and then you can drop it back off at that restaurant or a couple other collection points, so that way they can use it. It continues circulating, and again, the restaurant itself doesn't have to keep buying those stuff as well, so it helps save them money in the long run. We have a couple places that are working on that right now, seeing how it's going, and as it progresses, if it's going well, we'll work to expand that further. And then for strategy 6, which is enhancing the resilience of our people in our place, one of our big programs that we're working on is with the Bryant neighborhood here in Ann Arbor. If you're not familiar, it's on the south side of town. Basically, this is one of our frontline populations where a lot of individuals have often lacked access to a lot of the things they need, especially for when it comes to sustainability. So what we're working directly with these residents to co-design a project that's working to fully decarbonize all of the homes in that neighborhood. And this will be the first neighborhood in Ann Arbor, and as far as we know, in America, to be an existing neighborhood that is fully decarbonizing. This will be all at no cost to residents, and what it is looking at their homes, getting an energy assessment, seeing where it's at, and then kind of improving it from there to get to a level. So think things like insulation, improving appliances, getting solar and different things like that. So save money in the long run while also making these homes healthier and safer for the residents. We also have an ambassadors program, which some of you might be familiar with, where residents from the community, it's 12 weeks of courses where it kind of goes through the various parts of this A20 plan. You learn about it with staff, and then at the end, you undertake a sustainability project with a staff member within the community to do something sustainable. The next round of that should be opening up in a few months, so if that's something you're interested in, we can talk more and be on the lookout for that. We also are piloting an Aging in Place Efficiently program, which is working with older income qualified adults to help them be able to stay in their homes and get those homes improved, to levels that are both safer, getting things like grab bars, walk-in showers where they need, as well as improving things like insulation, appliances, and stuff like that to, again, be saving money and having these, their homes be healthier and more comfortable so they can stay in their homes should they choose. We also have a 10,000 Trees initiative, which is working to plant 10,000 trees on private property all across Ann Arbor. We're just about to hit 4,000 trees planted since this program started. We have another event that's happening next week to plant more trees, so that number, if we talk in a few weeks, it's going to be much higher than that. And we're also monitoring air quality across the city. You can see in a couple places, like on the farmer's market, a little air quality monitor. And then lastly, we're working on installing resilience hubs and connecting them to a resilience network. We currently have 2 resilience hubs at the Northside Community Center and now the Bryant Community Center. These are places that have solar and battery backup storage so that when the grid goes down, like think back to the ice storms just a few months ago that were super fun. Yeah, I would imagine you would not. It was a lot, and we were there. And these places, because they have solar and battery backup, they provide a place that has still, in that case, heating. In the summer, it could have cooling. It has a place where people, again, if you don't have power, you can charge your phones, you can cook a meal, you can get a meal, and in some cases, you can even spend the night there if you need. So continuing to build that network out so things are all working and people can have access to them. And then lastly, for our just kind of other strategies, which again, just kind of intersects through all the other ones, we have one, it's called the Sustaining Ann Arbor Together grant program. And what this is it's grants that are given out to community-based organizations here in Ann Arbor so they can implement their own sustainability-focused activities. There's so many more things going on around here than we can physically see or physically do. And so that's where all these different communities kind of can step in and be able to do that work, and we want to help them be able to do that. And again, as related to the overarching values of this, we're embedding equity into everything we can. Every program that gets put in place, every project we do, everything always has to start with a question on how equitable is this? How is this considering everyone? Who is not being discussed here? And if they're not, how can we make sure we're including them? How can we get them in the room and having these discussions with us to make sure that all these programs are working for everyone? And then just in terms of just a couple things of what's coming next, in the upcoming year, what's kind of going on from here. We're getting really close to achieving 5 megawatts of solar on residential and commercial buildings through those solarized programs. We're currently in the process of fully decarbonizing 4 different city buildings. So fully getting them, so they're not emitting greenhouse gases in the process. We're building out, we have one resilience hub just went online. We're starting plans for designing another resilience hub in the community, as well as submitted a couple grants to kind of have more of those in the pipeline. We're also finishing a pilot right now of an energy advisor program, which would be a place where you, say you're looking into improving the energy efficiency of your home or becoming more renewable. It's a place where you can call in and someone will help walk you through the process. So instead of having to navigate all those things like, I don't know, it makes sense for me. How do I do this? Who do I call? So all the things that go into that process is someone who can help you through that and kind of connect you to different resources that you might need. Right, it's in a pilot right now. The pilot should be finishing in June. I think at the end of June there'll be a report and then we'll be moving forward with that. We're also currently going through an energy options analysis right now, which is looking at a couple different ways for how we can achieve 100% renewable energy as a city. A report of that similarly will be due soon, and then we'll be moving forward on that. As I mentioned, we're getting very, very close after this next event to getting to 10,000 trees planted. Hopefully we can accomplish that goal either this year or next year at this point. And then the last thing I want to go into, because it's also what's next, our climate millage. If you're unfamiliar, this passed just in November of last year. It went up for vote. 71% of the people in Ann Arbor who voted for it voted to approve this millage. And it was a 1 mil, 20-year millage, which basically means it's based on property tax values, and the number will kind of change each year. But roughly, it's estimated to bring in about $7 million per year to work on these different climate initiatives. So everything we talked about is getting a boost. This funding starts accruing in July of this year. And as part of it, we're working on a whole bunch of different things for that. One of the things that to be on the lookout for probably in the fall is we're going to be offering rebates that are going to be going towards a lot of these different technologies we talked about. Think rebates for things like insulation, heat pumps, renewable energy, all these things to kind of help bring down the costs for people that are interested in kind of going through this. A lot of those rebates are going to be tied to the Inflation Reduction Act, if you're familiar, from the federal government that offers tax incentives as well as also a rebate program at some point soon in the future. Hopefully we'll have more details on that soon. But all that's going to be designed so everything stacks with each other, so that way you're able to get the best price possible and make everything a lot more affordable. So that's all I have now. I'll be sticking around for questions. But we just want to say thank you for having me and thank you for listening to all this. As we mentioned, everything here is designed with the community and for the community. We don't, have any notion that we know everything there is to know about sustainability, climate action, things like that. So we really want to make sure we're, talking to people, hearing from people, hearing what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and all of that to really make sure this, all the things we're working on are beneficial for everyone in Ann Arbor. So thank you for that, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Yeah. About the 10,000 trees. Are these trees that are donated to neighborhoods to plant in those neighborhoods, or are they like the ones that you give when somebody dies? Or?
Yeah, so we have a couple, well, there's a couple different things. So we just have regular tree plantings that are kind of taking place like directly in neighborhoods. For this specific one, these are all trees that are, donated by the city. We have a couple different ways, like we have grants and stuff like that to purchase these trees. And what it is that residents can go out and we have it twice a year, once in the spring, once in the fall. And so you can sign up and there's a couple different tree options you can get. You go, you grab your tree and you just plant it on your property wherever you want. Doesn't have to be anything special. You don't have to have any special reason for why you want the tree or anything like that. You just get a tree and you can plant it wherever.
When is this next? Is it coming up this spring yet?
It's happening actually next weekend. The full we generally do a couple weeks before it starts. We do because we have a set number of trees, so we put a call out there and people can register for it. So that one's already full right now. There'll be another one happening in the fall. I think it's generally like October, November. We have it on our website. There's a newsletter that'll always be announced there, so you can always see when that's going to be happening next. Yeah.
So my question is about the number, I'm feeling a large number of the multi-story buildings downtown, 10 floors and above, and also the big sprawling developments, like the one Nixon and DuVarn, those. When Planning Commission and City Council is reviewing the developer's proposal for doing these things, and I'm thinking of the recent past 5-10 years, not the ones that are coming, do they take into account the environmental impacts and hold the developers, to certain standards?
Yeah, so the way it is right now, sustainability is part of the review, and so as it kind of goes through again, we mark off like, here's how it's achieving, here's how it's not achieving, here's how it can be improved, things like that. There's not necessarily a strict mechanism in place that says they have to do this, though. So it's just kind of there being said, here's what you need to improve. Unfortunately, it's not in a place where they have to do that. So part of that, we're looking into a couple different mechanisms to see what could be possible to advance that better.
So if let's say 820 recommends a certain standard and the development is not up to that standard, City Council can still approve it?
Yeah, as long as it's in line with the things that are legally enforceable.
Because it seems like because of the sheer square footage that they occupy, it would be good to hold them to it.
Yeah, and that's why we're looking at other things that are kind of broader community scaled that can kind of like work within that. So say again that does go through how can we minimize those impacts and how can we get things in place that are directly interacting with that. Say those specific buildings to kind of further bring that down and get it back in line with some of the priorities that we do have. So a lot of work to be done though. Yeah, in the back.
I'm wondering, I've heard about, and the city is considering or looking into the possibility of being, being in charge of their own utilities instead of DTE. And I'm just wondering if that is in any way like directly related or part of the strategy for A20, or is that just sort of independent, separate thing that's happening?
Yeah, so thanks for asking. So right now we have, I briefly mentioned but didn't go in depth on, we have an energy options analysis that is out, and it's looking at two different tracks of what could be done. One of those tracks would be a fully municipal utility. And basically what this would be is buying out all of everything that is owned by DTE here in Ann Arbor and fully committing to having power running 24/7, 365 days a year. Basically, that would be a somewhat long-term process. It would require a lot of negotiations kind of going through, figuring out with DTE how much the assets are worth, going through the court system, figuring out again how much they're worth, and then buying all that up and establishing the utility with all that. It's important to note, though, that that's purchasing the current system in place. So that would be it would be going through that whole process, figuring out how much it costs, buying it, owning it, and then figuring out how we go from there to get to 100% renewable with that asset. The other option that's being looked at is that sustainable energy utility, which I talked about a little bit. That would be similar process, but it wouldn't be buying out everything from the DTE system. This would be still owned by the city, but it wouldn't be responsible for, again, having that 24/7, 365 days of power. It would be a supplemental utility. And basically what that would be is, the city would purchase solar, wind, geothermal, whatever it might be, and then people would connect to that system. So you would essentially have two separate utility bills, one for that level of clean, sustainable energy through that, as well as your DTE bill for whatever might be left over. So it kind of, it allows the ability to scale over time. We could do it right now. We could start on it, start getting that ramped up and building up over time. And it's important to note that doesn't mean they're mutually exclusive either. Say we were to go down that sustainable energy utility route, and then 3-4 years down the road, we're like, okay, switching to a full municipal utility makes sense. We can do that at that time, and everything gets joined together. So like I said, right now we're working, a consultant is doing a feasibility study, looking at those different options, seeing how much they would cost, just at the front end of it, how much it would take to get everything up going, and what the cost would be to all the residents and things like that. Once we have that study back, we'll be seeing kind of what of those options or other options even might work best for everyone, and then starting to go down that line. So is happening. Some are more affiliated with what the city is looking at right now. Some are more kind of just broad ideas from the community and stuff like that. But yeah, we're working to figure out which options make the most sense, because we don't want to go down something that costs everyone a whole bunch of money without really advancing any goals or anything like that. Yeah, way in the back. Yeah, we have conversations with them all the time. Some of the stuff is, a little different just because they own their own buildings, they're on different things, and it can be a little trickier, but we're very much in the room where things are happening. We're talking together. We actually recently, a couple months ago, we went in together on a joint request for proposals on solar. So some of the stuff was on their building, some of the stuff was on our building, so that way it's all, working kind of similarly, similar contractors, things like that. So while we don't necessarily, everything's not 100% aligned, we are regularly communicating with them, we are regularly working on projects together, and doing just a whole bunch of stuff and kind of furthering that collaboration to make sure that things don't get, we don't go all the way in one direction, they go in another direction, and nothing fits together. So, yeah.
I have a lot of random musings that may
Go for it.
years ago, I took one class in the School of Natural Resources here, and one thing that still stands out in my mind is the importance, when you're looking at this case and different ways that we power our homes and our cars and our planes and everything else, to really look at that cradle to grave lifespan, and not just how it affects me. So, for instance, with coal, you have the environmental impact of removing mountaintops and minor health, and the
Yeah. I'll just start talking about stuff, and we'll go from wherever. If I don't answer anything, just keep throwing it back. Yeah, that's why just overall, I think your point towards efficiency is one of the things we're definitely focusing on. Because at the end of the day, what is the most, carbon efficient amount of power you use? And that's the power you don't use. So figuring out, how can we make, starting, a lot of the times we try to start with efficiency first. How can we get everything ready from that capacity so you're able to operate in a more efficient manner? Think of, some of that comes in with, say, talk about air conditioning or going to heat pumps kind of a thing. If you were to just go without doing anything and you buy a new heat pump, it's gonna be scaled for your current usage. But if you first go through and you do things like insulation, air sealing, improving the efficiency, all of that, you're not gonna need as big of a system. You're gonna be able to get a smaller system that uses less energy, saves you money because you're not buying a bigger system, and you're able to, again, overall use less energy. That similarly goes then for how much solar you might need or how much renewable energy you might need or anything like that. So really trying to focus on what are the things we can get away with reducing before we have to worry about that. And similar thing for like vehicles. Again, like electric vehicles, they're great because they have less emissions, but like you said, there's all that stuff. How much more carbon effective is it to ride a bike instead of an electric vehicle? Things like that. So even while there are those kind of improvements over time, using less overall is always going to be better because it doesn't take anything to generate nothing. You're doing good there. Anything I didn't address from that, because there definitely was.
Even the benefits of solar here in Michigan compared to Tucson.
Oh, sure. So a fun fact of, don't have the exact percentage or whatever. So places like, Germany, places in, Scandinavian countries and stuff like that are heavy solar users and are generally widely regarded as some of the leaders in how much, solar renewable energy they're using. Michigan, as a state, has a higher solar potential than those countries. So obviously they're doing a whole bunch of stuff as well. It's not just entirely solar, but they do a lot of solar, and we are able to, we have more potential for solar than that. Obviously, places like Arizona, California, and especially where it's sunny every day instead of where it's always gray here in the fun Michigan winters we do have. But we still have that potential. There's a lot for it. Like you said, we probably cannot rely just on one simple thing. Like, again, there's not one switch you can pull and bam, solved everything. It's great. So looking at all sorts of different things as much as we can to figure out where to get it from. And similarly, I know you mentioned what happens after solar panels. Early on, as with everything we do, there's a landfill right there. But increasingly, as the technology is becoming more advanced, people are learning more about it as technology does, we're finding out more and more ways that we can recycle these materials, how they can be reusing either the panels themselves, the wiring inside, that can go right back into the system. So as it's going, they're getting increasingly more recyclable, and it's happening more and more. So right now, a decent amount is recycled. 10 years down the line, because the solar panels, again, have something like 20, 25-year lifespans in a lot of cases. Where are we going to be in 25 years at this point? Like we said, new iPhone model every year, new TV model every 6 months somehow. By the time we get 25 years down the road, and as the technology continues to mature, more people are getting it, we learn better how we can recycle it, how we can reuse it. It's just going to become more and more reusable in that span or that capacity. Yeah.
Is the cost of the solar decreasing?
Yeah, it is going down every single year, and with all these things, costs are going to continue to go down. One, like we mentioned, with that Solarize, you get a group discount. The federal government has just gone and they've enhanced their tax credits for it. So if you have a tax burden right now, if you were to buy solar panels, you get 30% off on your taxes. If you're doing there's a couple different things, you can get potentially up to 50% off of the cost of solar panels just from that incentive. as well as those rebates that the city is going to be putting out. That's going to bring the cost down even more. Then again, additionally, as with like any technology, the more, again, the more people are in the market, the more the market heats up, the more, manufacturers get in, contractors get in. It's going to drive the competition and continue to bring those prices down. But these prices have gone down significantly just in the past few years, and it's only, as far as we can see right now, that trend should continue. Yeah.
As far as electric vehicles, are hoping that more people will have them. And then when those batteries are worn out, they will be a terrific thing to get rid of. You have mountains of batteries, but it will all be leaching into the water and the soil. And so they might have cause fewer emissions to go into the air than into the earth. They may double or triple the residue there.
Yeah, and I think that was like kind of like we were talking about over there, the concept of how can we not just, pivot to a whole new technology that might have its own, sets of negatives, might have its own sets of positives and stuff like that. But how can we reduce overall how much we're doing, instead of saying, excuse me, how can we replace every single car with every single car is now an electric vehicle? Instead, how can we reduce the number of cars overall? How do we get more people on bikes? How can we get more people taking buses? How can we get more people using public transit overall or walking to where they are? Obviously, a lot of times that's not feasible, but how can we reimagine the systems to get to that ability so that way, because obviously some people, you're still going to need cars for certain things, but how can we reduce that overall number so we don't necessarily have those issues like that? And then similarly, this is who knows what, but continuing to make it so those are more potentially reusable, recyclable. But your point is well taken for the right now. And yeah, so how can we overall reduce how much we need to rely on things like vehicles and all sorts of things? Yes.
So back to Ann Arbor. So one thing I find frustrating, not being terribly knowledgeable about this, is, for instance, getting phone calls from someone representing DTE, telling me that if I would like to have more of my energy usage come from solar, I can pay X amount more. The first time I got a call like that, I thought, great, of course I'll do that. But then when it's repeated, and then I'm told, it's less expensive to do this. I mean, why isn't DTE just doing that and passing that along to all of us? Why is that something an individual customer has to decide? Wouldn't it just be good business sense on their part to go with what makes sense? I'm confused by that, and so I find, and I don't feel like I'm in a position to put the solar panels up, but I guess just in what you all are doing and thinking about, not all of us feel competent to, make these choices and to feel like we're making a good decision about them. So it would be really helpful the more the city could point us, and then the concept of DTE is just confusing.
Yeah, and completely understand, because it is a wide landscape and it is hard to pick everything out. And that's part of, like I mentioned, with that energy advisor program that we're working on. That's one of the ways we're attempting to help make that simpler, as well as looking at those broader overarching things so you don't have to think about as much. Like obviously you're going to be thinking about things where, like, your furnace goes out, you need a new furnace. Maybe look at a heat pump. How can we figure that out? But there's going to be things like that are, but how can we help, help people better understand that? So that's one of the things we're working on. As for the DTE side, I don't speak for DTE, obviously, but they do have, they have a couple different programs. Like you mentioned, they have their My Green Power, which is, it says that, if you opt in, that's resulting in new renewable energy onto the grid. I don't know right now, but there was at least like 2 months ago, it was at cost parity. So if you signed up at that point in time, you would see no change in your bill, like on the rates. Like sometimes it's been a little more, but that's kind of based on market conditions. I don't know what's at right now, but most recently it was free. And so you can sign up, you can also cancel any time for that. They have to put out an integrated resource plan every few years, and that kind of charts where they're going down that line, which, you know, they're working on it. Again, I don't work there, so I can't say anything necessarily about it or how it's going, but you can always check that out. And, you know, increasingly, when there are things at like the Public Service Commission calling in to kind of provide feedback on what you are interested in for that. So I think Clark is telling me my time is up, but I can stick around afterwards. And so I'll stick around after and I'll talk to people as they have questions.
That's my first question. Thank you very much. If you'll stay after. We certainly want to respect your time, and if people would like to leave right now, that's fine. It's about 5 after 12, but if you can stay for a few more minutes. And you can't speak for DT&E. I can give my opinion. They're somewhat governed by the Michigan Public Service Commission, and that's an organization you can write to and try to influence what DTE does. I don't know if everybody knows this, they're like a public corporation. I think they're a nonprofit. I'm not sure, but Mary, that's the key thing. They have stockholders.
First of all, they need a 6% increase in what they give their stockholders, and then they'll try to help us.
Right. So DT isn't known as one of the more progressive organizations among utilities. Consumers Power has a little bit better reputation. The Board of Water and Light in Lansing. And then there were a couple questions from Jane and also Diane about turnaround, recycling. Hey, how do we provide all this battery storage as it really ramps up? And there's so much more. And for anybody that's interested, there was about a month ago, there was a really good Saturday morning physics lecture from one of the professors at our local university here. The professor studies the long-term transition to, I don't know what his full scope is, but the lecture was on the transition to alternative energy and to how to address climate change, which he acknowledged we're going to need a lot of cobalt and nickel and lithium. He had a whole list of things, and he said, the lecture lasts an hour. One of the important messages was, it's not going to be that simple. We don't have that lithium and cobalt and all just sitting around. Yes, we're going to have to mine it in other countries because it doesn't all exist here. But what's the best path forward in doing that? And what he said was, implement the kind of practices that we have in the U.S. We have some of the best mining practices in the world. And yes, there's been some exploitation in countries like Africa where there are some rare earth deposits. But the best we can do is implement the best mining processes that we have, and child protection and all the stuff that we know of here. But it's not going to be simple, and there are going to be compromises. And another little gem was, you can't be anti-mining and also want to effectively address climate change. But he did say, as time goes on, we're going to develop many, thousands of tons of lithium batteries. The lithium can be recycled, the cobalt can be recycled from batteries and extracted. So we need to use good practices for doing that. But as time goes on, we're not going to continue every year to need more and more storage. At some point, things will level off. We have that critical mass of lithium and the other rare elements that are in use. And yes, we'll always need more coming into the system, but the system, it's not always going to be, the daunting challenge that it is right now. So I can if anybody's interested, I can find out that Saturday morning physics lecture. Other questions for Joe? I'll be here. Okay. Thanks.